I watched my daughter Harper collapse at the kitchen table, her acceptance letter crumpled in her shaking hands. The full-ride scholarship to Stanford she had sacrificed everything for had just been revoked. Not because of her grades. Not because of anything she did wrong, but because my sister Diana had called the university pretending to be me and withdrawn Harper's application, then submitted her own daughter's application using Harper's essay, recommendations, and portfolio. My parents knew. They helped her do it. They said it was better for the family. 3 years ago, when Harper was just 13 years old, she came home from school with stars in her eyes and a brochure in her hands. Stanford University. She spread the glossy pages across our small kitchen table in our 2-bedroom apartment in Sacramento and told me with absolute certainty that this was where she would go to college. I'm a dental hygienist. I've been a single mother since Harper was 2, when I finally found the courage to leave her father after years of his verbal abuse and controlling behavior. We don't have much. Our apartment is clean but modest. Our furniture is secondhand. We clip coupons and shop sales. But what we do have is each other. And we've always had dreams. When Harper announced her Stanford ambition, I didn't laugh or tell her it was impossible. I looked into those determined brown eyes and said, "Then let's figure out how to make it happen." From that moment, Harper transformed herself. She was already a good student, but she became extraordinary. Straight A's in every class, including advanced placement courses that made my head spin when she tried to explain them to me. She joined the robotics club at school, and within a year became its president. She started volunteering at the Children's Hospital every Tuesday and Thursday evening, reading to sick kids and helping in the playroom. Her schedule was relentless. School started at 7 in the morning and ended at 3 in the afternoon. Robotics club ran until 6. On volunteer days, she'd grab dinner from a vending machine at the hospital and work until 8. Then she'd come home, shower, and do homework until midnight. On weekends, she worked at a local bookstore to save money for college application fees. I watched my baby girl sacrifice her teenage years. While her friends went to movies and parties, Harper stayed home with her textbooks. While other kids posted selfies and spent hours on social media, Harper built robots and perfected her grade point average. She never complained, not once. She just kept working, kept pushing, kept believing. Our bond grew even stronger during those years. Late at night, when she'd finally close her books, we'd sit together on our worn couch and talk about the future. She'd tell me about the engineering programs at Stanford, about the research opportunities, about the life she was building brick by brick through sheer determination. I'd hold her hand and feel so proud I could barely breathe. But there was another part of my life, one that cast a shadow over Harper's bright dreams. My family, my sister Diana and my parents. Diana is 3 years younger than me. She's always been the golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. While I disappointed them by getting married young to a man who turned out to be abusive, Diana married Todd, a wealthy real estate developer. They live in a mansion in the suburbs. Their daughter Brooke attends an exclusive private school that costs more per year than I make in 6 months. Our parents, Richard and Patricia, have always made it clear who they value more. At family dinners, which I attended out of obligation and hope that maybe things would change, they'd ask Diana about her latest vacation or home renovation. They'd ask me when I was going to get a better job or find another husband. They'd fawn over Brooke's private school achievements and barely glance at Harper's report cards. Harper noticed. She stopped wanting to go to family dinners by the time she was 12, but I kept bringing her, kept hoping my family would see what an incredible person she was becoming. I was wrong to hope. The application process began in Harper's junior year of high school. She spent months crafting her personal essay, writing about growing up with a single mother, watching me work 2 jobs when she was younger, learning that strength comes from perseverance, and that success is built on sacrifice. She wrote about volunteering at the Children's Hospital, about how seeing sick kids fight every day taught her that her own struggles were manageable, that she had no right to complain when she had her health and her mind and her opportunities. Her teachers adored her. Mrs. Thompson, her robotics advisor, wrote a recommendation letter so glowing that Harper cried when she was allowed to read it. Her English teacher, Mr. Bernard, and her calculus teacher, Miss Rodriguez, Both wrote letters describing Harper as one of the most dedicated and brilliant students they'd taught in 20-plus years of teaching. Harper's robotics portfolio was stunning. She'd designed and built a mechanical arm that could perform delicate tasks, intended to help people with limited mobility. She'd won third place in a statewide competition. She had photos, videos, technical specifications, all meticulously documented. The night she submitted her Stanford application, December 15th of her junior year, Harper couldn't stop crying. They were tears of hope and fear mixed together, the tears of someone who has given everything and now has to wait to see if it was enough. I held her and promised, "No matter what happens, I am so proud of you. You've already succeeded in the ways that matter most." 2 weeks before the acceptance letters were supposed to arrive, Diana showed up at our apartment unannounced. This was unusual. Diana rarely visited. Our worlds were too different. She looked around our small living room with barely concealed disdain, then asked about Harper's application. I was so trusting. So stupid. I thought maybe Diana was finally taking an interest in her niece. I told her everything. I showed her Harper's essay on my laptop. I pulled up the online portfolio. I explained the recommendation letters, the extracurricular activities, the volunteer work. Diana took photos of everything with her phone, saying Brooke needed inspiration for her own college applications next year. Something felt off. Diana's smile didn't reach her eyes. Her questions were too specific, too probing, but I pushed the feeling down. She was my sister. Surely she wouldn't do anything to hurt Harper. I was so wrong. March 15th arrived like a sunrise after a long, dark night. Harper was at school when the email came through. I was at work, cleaning teeth and trying not to check my phone every 5 minutes. At 2:30 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. Harper's text message contained only one word and 7 exclamation points. Mom. I excused myself, went to the break room and called her. She was screaming and laughing and crying all at once. I got in! Mom, I got in! Full ride! They're giving me everything. Tuition, room, board, even a stipend for books. I sat down hard on a plastic chair and sobbed. My coworkers found me 10 minutes later still crying, and I explained through my tears that my daughter had just earned a full scholarship to Stanford University. They hugged me and cheered. My boss gave me the rest of the day off. Harper and I met at our favorite diner, a little place called Rosie's where we'd been going since she was small. We sat in our usual booth and ordered chocolate milkshakes, and for 2 hours we just celebrated. We made lists of what she'd need for college. We looked up pictures of the Stanford campus on my phone. We planned how we'd drive down together in August for freshman orientation. Harper's face glowed with joy so pure it hurt to look at. That evening, Harper called her grandparents to share the news. I sat beside her on the couch, listening to her excited voice as she told them about the scholarship. But something was wrong. Richard and Patricia's responses were oddly muted. They said congratulations, but their voices were flat, uncomfortable. Harper noticed. After she hung up, she looked at me with confusion in her eyes. Grandma and Grandpa didn't seem very happy, she said. They're just surprised, honey, I told her, pushing down my own unease. It's big news. They need time to process it. Harper tried calling Aunt Diana to share the news, but Diana didn't answer. She tried 3 times over the next 2 days. Diana never called back. The formal acceptance packet arrived in the mail 5 days later. A thick envelope with the Stanford logo, containing her official letter of acceptance, information about the scholarship, housing forms, and a deadline. Harper needed to confirm her acceptance by April 1st. We had less than 2 weeks to submit all the required paperwork. Diana and my parents continued to avoid our calls. This wasn't entirely unusual. Sometimes weeks would go by without contact, but the timing felt strange, wrong. I decided to drive to my parents' house and share the good news in person, hoping that seeing Harper's joy would thaw whatever weird coldness had settled over the family. It was a Saturday afternoon when Harper and I arrived at my parents' large colonial-style home in the suburbs. We didn't call ahead. I wanted it to be a surprise. We walked up to the front door, and I knocked. My mother opened it, and her face went pale when she saw us. Elsa, she said, my name coming out like a gasp. What are you doing here? We came to celebrate, I said, confused by her reaction. "Can we come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. Harper and I walked into the foyer, and I immediately heard voices from the dining room. We followed the sound and found my father, Diana, her husband Todd, and their daughter Brooke all sitting around the dining table having dinner together. The room fell silent when we appeared. Diana's fork clattered against her plate. Brooke looked at Harper with something like guilt in her eyes. Todd stared at his plate. My father stood up slowly, his face unreadable. "We wanted to share Harper's good news in person," I said, my voice bright despite the oppressive atmosphere. "She got into Stanford with a full-ride scholarship." The silence stretched on. Finally, Diana set down her wine glass and looked directly at me with cold, hard eyes. "Actually," she said, "that's not going to work out." I felt Harper stiffen beside me. "What do you mean?" I asked. Diana stood up, smoothing her expensive dress. "I called Stanford's admissions office 3 days ago. I told them Harper was declining the scholarship offer due to family health issues." The world tilted. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. "You what?" "I impersonated you," Diana said calmly, as if she were discussing the weather. "It wasn't hard. I know your social security number, your birth date, all your personal information. We've been sisters our whole lives, Elsa. I know everything about you." Harper made a small, wounded sound beside me. I couldn't look at her. If I looked at her, I would break, and I needed to stay standing. "Why?" The word came out as a whisper. "Because Brooke deserves that scholarship more," Diana said. "She's been struggling. Her grades aren't as good as Harper's, but she tries so hard. She's been going to private school her whole life. We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in her education. This scholarship would validate all of that. So you stole it," I said, my voice getting stronger. "You stole Harper's scholarship." "I didn't steal anything," Diana snapped. "I submitted Brooke's application to the same scholarship program. I used Harper's essay as inspiration, though of course I modified it to be about Brooke's experiences. I wrote new recommendation letters that said similar things to what Harper's teachers said. I submitted Brooke's own robotics work. Brooke doesn't do robotics," Harper said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was small, broken. "She does now," Diana said. "I enrolled her in a program. She's been working on projects for the past 3 weeks." I stared at my sister. This woman I'd known my entire life, and saw a stranger. "You can't do this. I'll call Stanford. I'll explain." "You can try," Diana said. "But Brooke's application was submitted 4 days ago. She was accepted yesterday. The scholarship is hers now. It's done." I turned to my parents, who had been silent through this entire exchange. "You knew about this? You let her do this?" My father cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable but not sorry. "Elsa, try to see this from a family perspective. Brooke needs this more than Harper does. Harper is smart enough to get scholarships elsewhere. She has options. But Brooke has struggled her whole life, and Diana and Todd have already invested so much. This evens things out. It's better for the whole family. Better for the family," I repeated numbly. "Harper worked for 3 years. She sacrificed everything. And that's admirable," my mother said, finally speaking. Her voice was gentle, pitying, which somehow made it worse. "But you've always been selfish, Elsa. You think only about yourself and Harper. You never think about the whole family. Diana needs this. Brooke needs this. For once in your life, think about someone else." Harper's legs gave out. She crumpled to the floor, and I dropped down beside her, gathering her into my arms. She was shaking, sobbing without making a sound. I looked up at my family, these people who were supposed to love us, and saw only cold justification in their eyes. "There's nothing you can do about it," Diana said, sitting back down at the table. "The decision has been made. Maybe Harper can go to community college for a few years and transfer somewhere later. She's resilient. She'll be fine." I helped Harper to her feet. She could barely stand. I walked her out of that house, supporting her weight, and got her into our car. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw my family standing on the front porch, watching us leave. None of them looked sorry. The drive home was silent, except for Harper's quiet crying. I couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, I would scream. and I was afraid that once I started, I would never stop. Harper went straight to her room when we got home and locked the door. I stood outside it for an hour, listening to her sob, feeling like my heart was being ripped from my chest. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop and started researching. What Diana had done had to be illegal, impersonation, identity theft, fraud. The words swam before my eyes as I clicked through law websites and legal advice forums. The next morning, I called Stanford's admissions office as soon as they opened. I explained the situation to 3 different people before finally reaching someone in authority. The assistant dean of admissions listened to my story, and I could hear the sympathy in her voice when she responded. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, "I believe you. But legally, this is very complex. Someone called us with access to your personal information and formally withdrew the application. We then accepted another qualified candidate in good faith. We can't simply reverse our decisions without substantial proof of fraud and a legal order. What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice hoarse from not sleeping. "You need to file a police report and potentially pursue legal action. If you can prove that fraud was committed, and if a court orders us to reverse our decision, we will comply. But that process could take months, possibly longer than the start of the fall semester." I thanked her and hung up. Then I went to Harper's room. She was still in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked at me when I entered, and I saw something in her expression that terrified me. She looked empty, defeated, like she'd given up. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't want to go to school tomorrow, or ever." I sat on the edge of her bed. "Harper, I worked for nothing," she said, her voice flat. "I'm nothing. They took everything. You are not nothing," I said fiercely. "You are brilliant and strong and good. What they did doesn't change who you are." But Harper turned away from me, facing the wall. Over the next 3 days, she stopped eating. She stopped talking. She quit robotics club and told the children's hospital she couldn't volunteer anymore. I found her journal on the 4th day, left open on her desk. The last entry said, "I should have known I didn't deserve it. People like Aunt Diana and Brooke get the good things. People like me just work hard for nothing." That entry changed something in me. My grief and shock crystallized into cold, focused rage. Not the screaming kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that plans and strategizes and doesn't stop until justice is served. I took a week off work, telling my boss I had a family emergency. I spent that week researching identity theft laws, fraud statutes, wire fraud regulations. I learned that what Diana did wasn't just unethical or mean. It was multiple federal crimes. I went to my church and found Marcus, a lawyer friend who attended services sometimes. He was a public defender, but he agreed to meet with me to discuss the case. When I told him what happened, his expression darkened. "This is serious, Elsa," he said. "Identity theft, wire fraud because emails were involved. Possibly conspiracy if your parents helped plan it. These are federal crimes with serious penalties. Can you help me?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll do this pro bono. This kind of injustice makes me sick. Let's build a case." We started gathering evidence. Marcus filed a formal request with Stanford for all records related to the phone call where someone claiming to be me had withdrawn Harper's application. It took a week, but they complied. The call had been made from Diana's cell phone number. Stanford recorded all official calls for quality assurance, and they sent us the audio file. I listened to it with Marcus in his small office. It was Diana's voice, no question. She was mimicking my speech patterns, but it was clearly her. She gave my social security number, my birth date, Harper's student ID number. She claimed that Harper had developed severe anxiety and that our family had decided it would be best for her to attend school closer to home. "This is gold," Marcus said quietly. "This is proof of impersonation and fraud, but I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of what Diana had done. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I used Diana's email password to log into her account. She'd used the same password since high school, a combination of her childhood dog's name and her birthday. I'd watched her type it 100 times over the years. What I found in her emails made me feel sick. There were messages between Diana and Brooke, dated 5 days after Diana had withdrawn Harper's application. Brooke had written, "Mom, this is wrong. Harper earned that scholarship. We can't do this. She's my cousin. She worked so hard." Diana's response was chilling. "You'll thank me later, sweetheart. This is what mothers do. We fight for our children. Harper will be fine. She's tough. But you need this opportunity. Trust me." There were more emails. Brooke continued to express doubts, but Diana wore her down, convinced her that what they were doing was somehow justified. I realized that Brooke was a victim too, manipulated by her own mother into participating in this theft. I downloaded everything. Every email, every attachment. I brought it all to Marcus. "This shows consciousness of guilt," Marcus said, reading through the emails. Diana knew what she was doing was wrong. And these messages from Brooke show she was pressured into going along with it. "What do we do now?" I asked. Marcus looked at me seriously. "We file a police report. We press charges. We take this to court. But Elsa, you need to understand that this is going to tear your family apart. They already tore my family apart," I said. "I'm just making sure there are consequences." Marcus filed the police report on a Monday morning. The charges were identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. We named Diana as the primary perpetrator and listed Richard and Patricia as accessories after the fact, since they had admitted to knowing about and supporting Diana's actions. The police detective assigned to the case was a woman named Angela Torres. She came to our apartment to interview Harper and me. She was kind but professional, asking detailed questions about the timeline of events, our relationship with Diana and our parents, and exactly what had been said during the confrontation at my parents' house. Harper, who had barely spoken in days, found her voice during the interview. She told Detective Torres about her 3 years of work, her dreams, and how it felt to have everything stolen. She showed the detective her robotics portfolio, her volunteer records, her report cards. By the end of the interview, Detective Torres had tears in her eyes. "I have a daughter," she said quietly. "If someone did this to her, I'd want them in prison. I'm going to do everything I can to help you." While the police investigation began, Marcus filed a civil lawsuit against Diana, Todd, Richard, and Patricia. He was suing for damages, emotional distress, and seeking an injunction to force Stanford to reverse their decision. Diana responded by hiring an expensive lawyer, a man named Gregory Ashford who specialized in defending white-collar criminals. Within days of being served with the lawsuit, Diana launched a counterattack. She started spreading rumors through the family. She called distant cousins, aunts, and uncles, telling them that I was lying, that I was jealous and vindictive, that I was trying to destroy her family because I'd always resented her success. She painted herself as the victim of a bitter, disturbed sister. My phone started ringing with calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Some believed Diana. Some believed me. Most just wanted to avoid taking sides. The family fractured along invisible fault lines. My parents went on local social media groups and church bulletin boards, posting vague messages about family betrayal and false accusations. They never named me directly, but everyone knew who they meant. I started getting pitying looks at the grocery store and at work. But then, something unexpected happened. The community began to fight back for Harper. Mrs. Thompson, Harper's robotics advisor, heard about what happened through the school grapevine. She was furious. She wrote a detailed letter to Stanford's administration, explaining Harper's character, her achievements, and the theft that had occurred. She described Harper's robotics projects in technical detail, proving that Brooke couldn't possibly have done similar work in just 3 weeks. 10 other teachers from Harper's school signed on to the letter. Her English teacher, her calculus teacher, her chemistry teacher, her history teacher, the school principal, they all vouched for Harper's integrity and dedication. Then the local news picked up the story. A reporter named Jessica Chang called me and asked if she could interview Harper and me. I was hesitant, but Marcus thought it was a good idea. "Public pressure can help," he said. "If people know what happened, Stanford will feel more pressure to make it right." The segment aired on a Tuesday evening. Jessica Chang told Harper's story with compassion and accuracy. She interviewed Mrs. Thompson, who called what happened an unconscionable theft from a deserving student. The segment ended with Harper's photo on the screen and the headline, "Teen Scholarship Stolen by Aunt." The story went viral locally, then regionally, then nationally. Within 48 hours, Harper's story was being shared on social media across the country. Thousands of people commented, expressing outrage and support. News outlets from other cities picked up the story. A hashtag started trending, "Justice for Harper." The outpouring of support began to bring Harper back to life. She read the comments on the news articles, saw the messages of encouragement from strangers, and something shifted in her. The emptiness in her eyes started to fill with determination. "Mom," she said one evening, sitting with me on the couch, "even if I never go to Stanford, I want them to know the truth. I want everyone to know what Aunt Diana did. Everyone will know." I promised her. "I'm making sure of it." Harper went back to school the next week. She was quieter than before, more guarded, but she was fighting. She rejoined the robotics club. She started rebuilding the projects Shed abandoned. Mrs. Thompson welcomed her back with a hug that lasted a full minute. Meanwhile, Detective Torres was making progress on the criminal investigation. Shed obtained Diana's phone records, which confirmed that the call to Stanford had been made from her number. Shed gotten a warrant for Diana's emails and found the same messages I'd already discovered. But then she found something else. Something none of us had expected. 5 years ago, Diana had impersonated a business rival to sabotage a commercial real estate deal. Shed called the rival's bank, pretending to be the woman, and changed information on a loan application, causing the deal to fall through. Diana's company had then swooped in and secured the property. The rival had suspected fraud but had never been able to prove it. Shed eventually dropped the matter, chalking it up to bad luck. But now, with Diana's phone records from that time period subpoenaed, the evidence was clear. Detective Torres came to my apartment to tell me what Shed found. "Your sister is a serial fraudster, Elsa. This isn't about family jealousy or a one-time mistake. She has a pattern of committing fraud to get what she wants. This strengthens our case significantly." I felt cold. I'd known Diana was selfish, entitled, spoiled. But I'd never imagined she was a criminal. A real criminal who had done this before and would do it again. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we move forward with formal charges. The district attorney is taking this seriously. Diana is going to be arrested." 3 weeks after I'd filed the police report, Detective Torres called me at 6 in the morning. "It's happening today," she said. "We're executing the arrest warrant this morning." I didn't tell Harper. I didn't want her to get her hopes up in case something went wrong. I went to work like normal, but I couldn't concentrate. I kept checking my phone every few minutes. At 10:30, Detective Torres texted me. "It's done. Diana is in custody." The formal charges were identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and, based on the evidence from 5 years ago, additional counts of fraud and impersonation. Richard and Patricia were charged as accessories after the fact for their role in helping plan and conceal Diana's crime. The arrest made the news immediately. The same reporter, Jessica Chang, covered the story. Cameras caught Diana being led from her mansion in handcuffs, her face hidden behind her hands. The footage played on local news channels all evening. My phone exploded with messages. Distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions. Some were supportive. Others accused me of going too far, of destroying the family, of being cruel and vindictive. I ignored them all. The trial was set for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, something happened that I hadn't anticipated. Brooke reached out to me. She called my cell phone on a Thursday afternoon. I almost didn't answer when I saw her name on the screen, but something made me pick up. "Aunt Elsa," she said, and her voice was thick with tears. "Please, I need to talk to you. Can I come over?" I hesitated, then agreed. An hour later, Brooke sat in my living room, looking small and scared. She was 17 years old, on the verge of graduating high school, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I'm so sorry," she said, the words tumbling out. I knew what my mom did was wrong. I told her not to do it. But she kept saying it was for my future, that Harper would be fine, that this was what family does for each other. She wore me down. I should have said no. I should have told someone. I'm so sorry. Harper was in her room, but I knew she could hear. I called to her. Harper, can you come out here? She appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, face wary. She and Brooke looked at each other. I don't want the scholarship, Brooke said, looking directly at Harper. I never did. I wanted to earn my own way. My mom never let me. She always had to control everything, make everything perfect. I'm going to testify against her. I'll tell the court everything. Harper's arms slowly uncrossed. She came into the living room and sat down. Why? Because it's the truth, Brooke said simply. And because you're my cousin. We grew up together. I remember when we were little, before everything got weird with our families. You always shared your toys with me. You were always kind. I should have been kind back. I'm sorry I wasn't. The two girls talked for an hour. I left them alone, giving them space to rebuild something that had been broken. When Brooke left, Harper looked at me with something like hope in her eyes. Maybe not everyone in our family is terrible, she said. The trial began on a cold morning in late May. The courthouse was packed. The media had turned this into a national story. Cameras lined the street outside. Inside, the courtroom was standing room only. The prosecution's case was devastating. They presented the phone records, proving Diana had called Stanford from her personal cell phone. They played the audio recording of her impersonating me. They showed the emails where Shed pressured Brooke into going along with the fraud. They brought in evidence of the real estate fraud from 5 years ago, establishing a pattern of behavior. Diana's lawyer, Gregory Ashford, tried to paint the situation as a misunderstanding, a family dispute that had been blown out of proportion. He argued that Diana had only been trying to help her daughter, that her actions, while perhaps misguided, came from a place of love. But then Brooke took the stand. She was sworn in, and she testified against her own mother. She told the court about the emails, about how Diana had manipulated her, about how Shed felt sick with guilt every day since Harper's scholarship was stolen. My mother told me that family helps each other, Brooke said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. But what she did wasn't helping. It was stealing. Harper earned that scholarship. She worked for 3 years. My mother took it because she couldn't stand that her sister's daughter was more successful than I was. That's not love. That's cruelty. Diana's face crumpled. For the first time since the trial began, she looked genuinely shaken. I was called to testify on the 3rd day of the trial. I walked to the witness stand with my head high, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor asked me to describe the events leading up to the theft. I told the story calmly, factually, without embellishment. I described Harper's 3 years of work. I described showing Diana the application materials, trusting her, believing she was interested in helping Brooke learn from Harper's example. I described the confrontation at my parents' house, the moment Diana told me what she'd done, the moment Harper collapsed on the floor. Gregory Ashford tried to rattle me during cross-examination. He asked if I'd always been jealous of Diana. He asked if I'd ever resented my parents for favoring her. He asked if this lawsuit wasn't really about revenge for years of feeling inferior. I looked him straight in the eye and said, I was never jealous of my sister. I was sad for her. She has everything. Money, a big house, every material thing she could want. But she's so empty inside that she had to steal from a 16-year-old girl to feel powerful. I don't envy that. I pity her. The courtroom was completely silent. Diana, sitting at the defense table, began to cry. Not quiet, dignified tears, but loud, gasping sobs. She stood up suddenly, and her lawyer tried to stop her, but she shook him off. You told me to do it, she screamed, pointing at our parents who were sitting in the gallery. You said Elsa didn't deserve success. You said Harper should sacrifice for the family like Elsa always had to. You told me to take it. You told me it was right. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Security guards moved toward Diana. Richard and Patricia sat frozen, their faces pale. Diana's lawyer managed to get her to sit down, but the damage was done. Shed just admitted everything and implicated our parents completely. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the 4 women stood and read the verdict. Diana, guilty on all counts. Richard and Patricia, guilty as accessories. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The courtroom was even more packed for sentencing than it had been for the trial. I sat in the front row with Harper on one side of me and Marcus on the other. Harper held my hand so tightly I lost feeling in my fingers. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Margaret Hale, looked over her reading glasses at Diana, Richard, and Patricia standing before her. "I've been a judge for 23 years," she said, her voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "I've seen a lot of crimes motivated by greed, by desperation, by anger. But I'm not sure I've ever seen anything quite like this. A mother stealing from her own niece, grandparents helping to destroy their grandchild's future. And for what? Not for survival, not for any real need, but for pride, for appearances, for the sick satisfaction of taking something from someone you considered beneath you." Diana was crying again. "My parents stood with their heads bowed," Judge Hale continued. "Harper Patterson worked for 3 years to earn that scholarship. She sacrificed her teenage years. She did everything right. And you took it from her because you couldn't stand to see her succeed where your own child struggled. That level of cruelty is breathtaking." She announced the sentences. Diana received 2 years in federal prison and 5 years of probation after release. Richard and Patricia received 1 year of house arrest, 500 hours of community service, and 5 years of probation. Additionally, Diana was ordered to pay restitution covering the value of the scholarship, approximately $200,000. Harper gasped beside me when she heard the prison sentence. I squeezed her hand. After the sentencing, we left the courthouse through a back exit to avoid the media. Marcus drove us home, and we sat in my apartment in stunned silence for a long time. "Is it really over?" Harper finally asked. "The criminal case is over," I said. "But we still need to deal with Stanford." That happened faster than I expected. 2 days after the sentencing, I received a call from Stanford's Dean of Admissions, a woman named Dr. Catherine Liu. She asked if she could meet with Harper and me in person. We agreed, and the following week, we made the 4-hour drive to the Stanford campus. Dr. Liu met us in her office, a warm room filled with books and sunlight. She shook our hands and invited us to sit. She said, looking directly at my daughter, "I want to start by apologizing. We should have investigated more thoroughly when the withdrawal call came in. We should have called you back to confirm. We didn't, and you suffered because of our failure." "I'm deeply sorry." Harper nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Liu continued, "We've completed our own internal review of what happened. We've revoked Brooke's acceptance, as her application was fraudulently submitted. We are restoring your full-ride scholarship, effective immediately. You'll start in the fall semester as originally planned." Harper burst into tears. I pulled her into my arms and we both sobbed together while Dr. Liu politely looked away. "There's more," Dr. Liu said when we'd composed ourselves. She pulled out an official-looking document. "The university's board of trustees was so moved by your story that they've decided to create a new scholarship in your name. The Harper Patterson Perseverance Scholarship will be awarded annually to a student who has overcome significant adversity to achieve academic excellence. We're funding it with a $500,000 endowment." I couldn't breathe. Harper looked at Dr. Liu with wonder in her eyes. "You're not just a student, Harper," Dr. Liu said gently. "You're an inspiration. We want to make sure other students like you have opportunities too." We left Stanford that day with Harper's scholarship restored, and a legacy that would help other students for generations. On the drive home, Harper was quiet, processing everything. "Mom," she said finally, "I thought I'd lost everything. But somehow I have more than I started with." "You never lost anything that mattered," I told her. "Your intelligence, your work ethic, your character, those are things no one can steal." Over the next few weeks, the family situation slowly began to shift. Todd, Diana's husband, filed for divorce. Had been shocked by the extent of his wife's fraud and wanted to distance himself and Brooke from her actions. He reached out to me through his lawyer, offering to pay for any additional expenses Harper might have at Stanford beyond what the scholarship covered. I accepted on Harper's behalf. Brooke came to visit us regularly. She was planning to attend community college in the fall, with the intention of transferring to a state university after 2 years. She and Harper were rebuilding their relationship carefully, like two people learning to trust each other again. "I'm not going to private school anymore," Brooke told us one evening. "I convinced my dad to let me finish my senior year at the public school near his new apartment. I want to see what it's like to be in the real world, not the bubble my mom kept me in." Richard and Patricia's house arrest meant they couldn't leave their home except for medical appointments and court-mandated therapy. The therapist they were assigned specialized in family dynamics and narcissistic behavior patterns. After 2 months of sessions, my father wrote me a letter. It arrived on a Tuesday. I sat at the kitchen table and read it 3 times. "Dear Elsa." It began. "I've spent the past 2 months in therapy trying to understand how I became the kind of father who would hurt his own granddaughter. The therapist says I have a pattern of conditional love, that I taught my children that affection and approval had to be earned through achievement, and that some people deserved more than others based on circumstances of birth or marriage. I taught Diana that she was more valuable than you. I taught you that you were less important. I taught both of you that love was a competition. I was wrong about everything. I failed you as a father. I destroyed my own family. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I see now what I did. I'm 64 years old, and I'm just now learning what it means to love someone unconditionally. I'm learning it too late to fix the damage I caused, but maybe not too late to change who I am in whatever time I have left. I'm proud of Harper. I'm proud of you. I should have said that 38 years ago and every day since. I'm sorry I didn't. I cried when I read it, not because it fixed anything, but because it was real." After the letter, my mother called. "Elsa," she said, her voice small and uncertain. "Would you and Harper be willing to see me after my house arrest ends? I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want a chance to know my granddaughter. The real Harper, not the idea of Harper I had in my head." I told her I'd think about it and talk to Harper. When I showed Harper the letter from her grandfather and told her about the phone call from her grandmother, she was quiet for a long time. "I'm not ready to have them back in my life like before," she said finally. "But maybe we could try lunch once a month. Somewhere public. And if they mess up again, we're done." That sounds fair. I agreed. Diana's time in federal prison was harder on her than I'd expected. Todd brought Brooke to visit her once a month, but the visits were awkward and painful. Diana had lost everything. Her mansion, her social status, her marriage, her relationship with her daughter. She was in prison with women who had committed real crimes out of real desperation, and she was the woman who'd stolen from a child because of pride. 6 months into her sentence, Diana asked if she could write to Harper. The request came through Brooke, who asked me and Harper if it would be okay. "I don't know what she wants to say," Brooke told us. "But I think she's starting to understand what she did. Prison is changing her." Harper thought about it, then agreed. The letter arrived a week later. "Dear Harper." Diana had written in handwriting that looked shakier than I remembered. "I don't know how to start this letter because there aren't words big enough to say how sorry I am. I stole 3 years of your life. I stole your dream. I stole your trust and your joy. I did it because I was so focused on making Brooke look successful that I forgot success has to be earned. I forgot that love means wanting the best for people even when it's hard. I forgot what family really means. You earned that scholarship. You deserved it. You deserve to celebrate it without someone taking it from you. I wish I could give you back what I took, but I can't. All I can do is tell you the truth. You were always everything I pretended Brooke was. You were always kind and hardworking and brilliant. I was jealous of your mother for having you. I was jealous of you for being real when Brooke and I were just performing. I'm in prison now, and I deserve to be here. But I want you to know that I see you now. The real you. And you're extraordinary. I'm sorry. I'll be sorry for the rest of my life. I hope you have a wonderful time at Stanford. I hope you accomplish everything you dream of. You will." Harper read the letter, then put it in her desk drawer. "I don't forgive her," she said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But at least she finally told the truth." 3 months before Harper left for Stanford, we decided to meet Diana at the prison. It was Harper's idea. She said she needed to see Diana face to face one more time, to close that chapter of her life. The prison visiting room was bleak and cold. Diana came in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen her. She sat across from us, her hands folded on the table, and waited. Harper spoke first. "I don't forgive you," she said clearly. "But I don't hate you either. I'm going to Stanford in August. I'm going to succeed. Every success I have will be because I earned it, not because I stole it. I hope someday you understand the difference." Diana's eyes filled with tears. "I understand now," she said, her voice hoarse. "That's why I'm here and you're going to Stanford. You're everything I pretended to be, everything I tried to take from you to give to Brooke. You're real. I never was." We left the prison that day, and Harper didn't look back. August arrived with bright sunshine and clear blue skies. Harper's car was packed with everything she needed for college: clothes, bedding, her laptop, her robotics equipment, a corkboard covered with photos of us through the years. Our small apartment looked even smaller with her room empty. We left Sacramento at 6 in the morning to beat the traffic. The drive to Stanford took 4 hours, and we spent it listening to Harper's favorite music and talking about everything and nothing. She was nervous but excited, her eyes bright with anticipation. The Stanford campus was beautiful, all red-tiled roofs and sandstone buildings surrounded by palm trees. We found Harper's dorm, a 4-story building called Wilbur Hall. Her room was on the 3rd floor, small but comfortable, with a desk under the window and 2 twin beds. We started unpacking. I made Harper's bed with the sheets Wed bought together, lavender with tiny white stars. Harper organized her desk, setting up her laptop and arranging her robotics tools. We hung the corkboard on the wall above her bed. As we worked, other students and parents moved up and down the hallway, everyone in the same state of excited chaos. Harper's roommate arrived around noon, a girl named Autumn from Colorado. She had wild curly hair and an infectious laugh. Within 10 minutes, she and Harper were chatting like old friends, comparing class schedules and talking about the freshman orientation activities. I watched my daughter, seeing her come alive in a way she hadn't since before the scholarship was stolen. She was laughing, making plans, looking forward instead of back. By 3 in the afternoon, the room was organized and perfect. Harper walked me down to my car. We stood in the parking lot, and I tried not to cry. "I don't know how to say goodbye," Harper said, her voice thick. "Then don't," I told her. "Just say see you soon. Because I'll be back for Parents' Weekend in October." We hugged for a long time. I held my baby girl, this incredible person I'd had the privilege of raising, and felt pride so intense it hurt. "Mom," Harper whispered into my shoulder, "you saved me. Not just the scholarship. You saved me from becoming bitter. You showed me how to fight without becoming cruel. You showed me that the truth matters more than peace. You saved yourself, sweetheart," I said, pulling back to look at her face. "I just made sure the truth came out. You did everything else." I watched her walk back to her dorm, watched her wave from the entrance before disappearing inside. Then I got in my car and started the long drive home. The drive gave me time to think about everything that had happened. 7 months ago, Diana had stolen Harper's scholarship. 7 months ago, I'd watched my daughter collapse in despair. 7 months ago, I'd thought our family was destroyed forever. But Wed fought back. Wed told the truth. Wed demanded justice. And Wed won. Not because Diana went to prison. Not because my parents were punished. We won because Harper was at Stanford where she belonged. We won because Shed learned that her worth wasn't determined by what other people thought or did. We won because Wed stayed true to ourselves even when it would have been easier to stay silent. I pulled into a rest stop about an hour from home and sat in my car, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I pulled out the journal I'd started keeping during the darkest days of the crisis. I'd written in it every night, processing my feelings, planning our strategy, trying to make sense of the pain. Now I wrote one final entry. I learned that protecting the people you love doesn't mean keeping the peace. Sometimes it means going to war. I learned that justice isn't revenge. It's accountability. I learned that family isn't defined by blood but by respect, honesty, and love. I learned that my daughter is stronger than I ever imagined. And that strength isn't about never breaking, it's about choosing to heal. I learned that the truth is always worth fighting for, even when the fight costs you everything you thought you had. Especially then. I closed the journal and drove home to my empty apartment. It was strange being there without Harper. Her absence filled every room. But I wasn't sad. I was at peace. 3 years passed. Harper thrived at Stanford. She made the dean's list every semester. She continued her work in robotics, developing a revolutionary new prosthetic system that could respond to neural signals, giving amputees finer control over artificial limbs. Her research won awards. She presented at conferences. She was offered internships at top tech companies. She made friends, real friends who valued her for who she was. She dated a few people, nothing serious, but she learned about relationships and trust. She called me every Sunday evening, and we'd talk for an hour about her week, her classes, her projects. Brooke transferred from community college to Sacramento State University after 2 years, majoring in social work. She wanted to help families navigate dysfunction and trauma. She and Harper saw each other during breaks. Their relationship cautious but genuine. Diana was released from federal prison after serving 20 months with good behavior. She moved into a small apartment in a different city, started working at a retail store, and attended mandated therapy 3 times a week. She wrote to Harper once a month, letters that Harper sometimes read and sometimes didn't. The relationship would never be repaired, but it wasn't filled with hate anymore either. Todd remarried, a kind woman named Susan, who treated Brooke like her own daughter. Richard and Patricia completed their house arrest and probation. They attended therapy regularly and slowly, carefully. Built a relationship with Harper based on respect, rather than expectation. We had lunch together once a month. Awkward at first, but gradually more comfortable. I was promoted to office manager at the dental practice where I worked. The raise allowed me to move to a slightly larger apartment, one with 2 bedrooms, so Harper would have her own room when she visited. I started dating Sam, a kind middle school teacher I met at a community event. We took things slowly, but he made me laugh and made me feel valued. In May of Harper's senior year, I flew to Stanford for her final showcase, where graduating engineering students presented their research to faculty, industry professionals, and potential employers. She volunteers to tutor struggling students. She mentors younger women in the engineering program. She uses her gifts to lift others up. That kind of character is rare. You raised an extraordinary human being. I couldn't speak. I just nodded and tried not to cry. That evening, Harper and I had dinner at a nice restaurant near campus. We ordered too much food and split a dessert. Harper talked about her plans. She'd accepted a position at a biotech startup in San Francisco that specialized in medical devices. She'd be starting in July, designing next-generation prosthetics. "I'm going to change people's lives, Mom," she said, her eyes bright. People who lost limbs, who thought they'd never have full function again. I'm going to give them that back. "You already changed lives," I told her. "You changed mine. You showed me what real strength looks like. You showed me first," Harper said softly. "You left Dad when I was little, even though it was hard and scary. You worked 2 jobs to support us. You believed in me when I said I wanted to go to Stanford. You fought for me when Diana stole my scholarship. You never gave up. You're the strongest person I know." We finished dinner and walked back to her dorm under a sky full of stars. At her building entrance, she hugged me tight. "I love you, Mom," she said. "I love you too, baby, always." I flew home the next morning. A week later, Harper graduated from Stanford with honors. I sat in the audience with Brooke, Todd, Susan, Richard, and Patricia. We cheered when her name was called. We took 100 photos. We celebrated at a restaurant afterward, this strange, broken, healing family. That night, alone in my hotel room, I opened my journal one last time. I'd filled 3 notebooks over the past 3.5 years, documenting every step of our journey from devastation to triumph. I wrote, "They tried to steal her future. Instead, they taught us both who we really are." Harper learned she's unstoppable. I learned I'm braver than I thought. The greatest gift you can give someone isn't protection from pain. It's the courage to face it and the integrity to fight for what's right. We fought. We won. Not because we destroyed them, but because we refused to let them destroy us. That's the only victory that matters. Harper is graduating from Stanford today. In 6 weeks, she'll start a job that will change lives. She earned every single bit of it. No one gave it to her. No one can ever take it away. That's real success. That's real strength. And I'm so grateful I got to witness it. I closed the journal and looked out the hotel window at the Stanford campus lit up against the night sky. Somewhere out there, Harper was celebrating with her friends, looking forward to a future shed built with her own hands. And I was at peace. The truth had won. Justice had been served. My daughter was thriving. And I'd learned that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing, and that love means fighting for people even when the fight costs you everything. Especially then. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to fight for what was right even when it meant going against your own family? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and demanding justice? What would you do if someone stole something precious from someone you loved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to fight their own battle. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people facing real challenges and finding the strength to overcome them. And please share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's fighting their own battle and needs to know they're not alone. Thank you for listening to Harper's story. Thank you for being part of our journey. I hope it reminded you that the truth is always worth fighting for, that justice matters, and that real strength comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, you're stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and more loved than you know.